Understood. Here's the text exactly as you provided. Further robust sanctions. Therefore, we're now proposing an 18th package of hard-bidding sanctions. We're targeting basically two sectors, the Russian energy sector and the Russian banking sector. We're widening export bans and controls, and West strengthened the anti-ER convention measures. Let me first goon the topic of energy for the first time. We proposed a transit-transaction ban for Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. This means that no EU operator will be able to engage directly or indirectly in any transaction regarding the Nord Stream pipelines. There is no return to the past. We also propose to lower the oil price cap from 60 to 45 per barrels, since the oil cap was introduced in 23. All prices have gone down. They now trade very close to the cap level. By lowering the cap, we adapted to changed markets conditions and restore its effectiveness. So oil exports still represent 1/3 of Russia's government revenues. We need to cut this source of revenues. The oil price cap is G7 coalition measures, so we will discuss at G7 in Canada at the end of this week or beginning of next week how to act together in addition to better enforce the cap on top of the 342 vessels already listed, list today additional 77 vessels that are part of the Russian shadow fleet. These vessels are a means to evade sanctions with our listings. We severely constrain Russia's options to export its oil through a shadow fleet. Finally, we introduce a ban on the import of refined products based on Russian crude oil. In this way, we want to prevent that some of the Russian crude oil reaches the EU market through the back door. Now let's have a look at the banking sector. This part, we're targeting the Russian banking sector by limiting its ability to raise funding and conduct transactions. We propose to transform the existing prohibition, use the SWIFT system into a full transaction ban, and we propose to apply such a transaction ban to another 22 Russian banks. We also propose to extend the transaction ban to financial operators in third countries that finance trade to Russia in circumvention of sanctions. And we also propose to sanction the Russian Direct Investment Fund, its subsidiaries, and its investment projects. In this way, an important channel for financing projects to modernize the Russian economy and strengthen its industrial base will be strictly limited. Now, the third point is that we propose further export bans worth more than 2.5 billion euros. This ban deprives the Russian economy of critical technology and industrial goods. So we're targeting machinery, metals, plastics, and chemicals. They are used as raw materials in industry. And we also restrict the export of dual-use goods and technologies that are used for producing drones, missiles, and other weapons systems. We want to make sure that Russia does not find ways to modernize its weapons with European technologies. Fourth and final, we want to sanction. We want sanctions better applied and respected. That is why we widen the scope of the transaction ban that already exists. And we list 22 Russian and foreign companies providing direct or indirect support to Russia's military and industrial complex. Putin's ability to sustain the war very much depends on the support he receives from third countries, those who support Russia's war. And that the efforts of conquering Ukraine carry a heavy responsibility. With this package, West step a pressure on Russia. Objective is very clear. We're reiterating the call for a full unconditional ceasefire of at least 30 days. This pause in hostilities could serve as a vital step towards reducing civilian suffering, allow space for meaningful talks for genuine peace. Thank you, President Talushu. Good afternoon. This a context where we adopt this package today is very, very stark. It is clear that Russia does not want peace. Nothing suggests Russia is ready for peace. On the contrary, Russia is escalating its war in Ukraine. Maternity hospitals, emergency medical wards, civilian houses, and infrastructure are not military targets. This is an outright illegal war. Russia is cruel, aggressive, and dangerous. And we act now to support Ukraine, but also put the pressure on Russia. As the president said, the next round of EU sanctions against Russia will target Russia's energy revenues, including the shadow fleet, its military industry, and its banking sector, energy. Like it was said, we propose adding another 77 vessels transporting Russian oil onto the list, which would bring the total to over 400. When sanctioned, Russia's shadow fleet tankers cannot dock in ports, and Russia has to find new vessels. This costs them more and runs down their profits. Zuhazan Bondilian said, we're also proposing to lower the oil price cap from 60 to 45, which is lower than the market price, and lowering the oil price gap will hit Russia's revenue. And we proposes sanctions on the North Strip pipelines to prevent Russia generating any revenue in the future. In this way, it sends a clear signal. We're not going back to business. As usual, on the banking sector, we're turning the ban on SWIFT messaging services into full transaction ban. We propose 22 new banks to the list of institutions blocked from the set transactions. And on military industry, they would not be able to do what they are doing, without the support of other. It's like it was said, so we're going after the companies who are directly involved in producing weapons or enabling production, including in third cow. Entries today, we suggest adding 22 new companies, including some UA from China and Belarus to the list of EU entities facing stricter restrictions on the dual-use goods. And this brings the total number of targeted companies to over 800. We do all this because sanctions work. Every sanction weakens Russia's ability to fight. Russia wants us to believe that they can continue this war. Forever, this is not simply true. Russia has lost tens of billions in oil revenues. Its economy is shrinking and its GDP has dropped, sanctioning the shadow flag. Ethasbina, particularly impactful. After our last sanctions package, the 17th sanctions package, the oil exports from Russia via the Black Sea and Baltic Sea routes declined by 30% in a week, only in the month of May. Russia's sovereign wealth fund declined by $6 billion, from $42 billion to $36 billion US dollars. And it could run out of money by next year. By cutting off revenue streams, we prevent them from refilling their war chest every day. Russia lies about its desire for peace. Putin is taking the world for a ride together with the United States. We can really force Putin to negotiate seriously every day. Russia continues its war, the price must go up. And that's why we're proposing this 18th package of sanctions. Thank you. Palace, we can take a couple of questions. Hello with your news. I want to ask you about the United States, both of you. Mentioned it. We know that you've been in contact with the United States to coordinate this package and sanctions. But so far, there has been no indication that the United States will also impose as sanctions. The key question now is on the pry. Seek upon Russian oil, it was agreed at G7 level. Can you give us a guarantee that the European Union will lower the price upon Russian oil, even if you don't get the participation of the United States? Or is this completely dependent on what President Trump chooses to do? Thank you both. So we have always been very coordinated on the G7 on the topic of the oil price cap. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussions that we're going to have in Canada in about a week. There, this topic will play a role because and the Americans know as we, La Salafusion 7, that the oil price has lowered so much that the effectiveness of the cap is to be questioned. And therefore, we'll want to lower the oil price from 60 per barrel down to 45 per barrel. Very much looking forward to that. Assumption is we that together. As G7, we have started that as G7, it was successful. We made some measure from the G7, and I want to continue this measure as G7. Yes. I have nothing to add. Okay, Mark, does it work or not? Yeah, it works. Good afternoon, Mark Paper on Fosk, Netherlands. It's two questions. One is a fall. Because you say I'm Mrs. Madame President. You say I'm looking forward to the discussions in the G7. How confident are you at the cap of 45 billion will $45 per barrel will actually be implemented? And two, maybe fourth from Mrs. Kallas, because you said the revenues of Russia would be hit hard by this 45 barrel cap. How hard? Do you know what would this cost Russia? Thanks to the first part of your question, Omer team have of course been in touch with all the G7s, but also specifically with the United States. And I've also spoken several times to Senator Lindsey Graham, who is the initiator of the American package of sanctions. Somewhere very much aligned in the aim to Russia by those massive sanctions to come to the negotiation table and to be serious about negotiations that leads towards just and lasting peace. That is the common aim. We have different instruments. These are different sanctions packages, but we're very much aligned in the aim. And therefore, I'm very confident that we will achieve this goal. There's one point on the revenues, perhaps, FIUA. Laukaya figure that struck me in the discussion about energy. I think it was in our college that the energy commissioner presented those figures at the beginning of the war. Russia had 12 billion euros of energy or of revenues from fossil fuels from Europe per month, 12 billion, and now we're down to 1.8 billion, still too much. So we're phasing out Russian fossil fuels. The proposal is from the commission. But this shows so much only if you look only at the European or the revenues from Europe to Russia. How much? These different measures have already had an impact on reducing the revenues of Russia, yes. And to add to that, it is accumulating as well. I think we were also surprised that the last sanctions package among the shadow fleet had such a big effect, that it was really reducing the revenues from oil exports from the Black Sea and Baltic Sea by 30%. Because that's why I can't give you an exact number, but we feel that these UMA sanctions have a huge effect together with the other sanctions that we have already done. Thank you, Par. President, thank you, HRV Pen. Thank you for your participation and wish you a good afternoon.